That's one of my favorite things is to do the second fire to see how much more paint that I need. If I need a third fire, but these are designed to be the second fire piece. I'm going to get up from my position right here and go to my painting table. Thank you for joining me. Yes. Okay, here we are. When I start this second fire, we're going to get it just as close as we can. When I start this second fire, I'm going to turn the piece upside down. And the reason I turn it upside down is so that I can paint on the dark shadow side and the grapes that are underneath on the dark side of the grapes. I know that you've got a step-by-step. That step-by-step may not exactly match what I say today, but it'll be fairly close. I think it's real important to know that you have options, okay? You have options of whether somebody else is on screen right at the moment. I don't know if I'm on screen or not, but somebody else is. Suzanne? You need to mute your computer.
You're on screen.
Okay. All right. So what we're about here is we're about to put the depth down under these grapes so that the ones on top will be the ones that are the most important. We created depth by putting in more values in the first fire. So that means we got more darks in the first fire and we have more values in our painting. Now I have in the piece, these little grapes down here are not green, but you know, I have an artist license going here that if I want to change that color, that is my prerogative to change the color. And so the little green grapes are really good to add a little color down at the bottom. And I'm going to add another one right at the bottom of it and turn it blue. And one of the things that you need to remember is, and this is really important, that you load your brush well with the color. If you don't load your brush well enough, then you won't get enough paint on to make this work. Okay, so I've put a little blue grape down at the bottom to kind of tie these together. And I'm going to put another one, and I'm going to put another one right in here. What does that mean? That means I painted right over these little green ones. Well, I'm going to wipe them right back out right here, pull some of that blue onto that green one right there so that it interconnects the ones that I just added there. If I don't like that and I think it needs another one, then I'll just add another one down at the bottom. Now that may mean that you need another fire just because these are first fire. But if you put enough paint on, then you won't need another fire. On the green ones, I'm using just a little bit of French green and a little bit of dark green. And I'm going to put a shadow on those little green ones right there as I paint. And then I'll come right here. I'm taking the blue and I'm going to just pull that right into the edge of that dark shape where that green is. And I'm going to leave that right there. And notice that I left a highlight here. That's important that you leave a little highlight on those grapes. If I want a little one over here, I just push out a little light. Now these grapes turned a little pink, and that's okay. That's my deep berry color. And that works just fine. What I do is I'll take that deep berry and I'll add cobalt to it. And from the cobalt, I'll go right into blue black. So what I'm going to do, look at that. I'm going to darken that grape right there. And what's nice about it is that pretty pink color will be underneath there because our paints are transparent. It'll be underneath there. And as I move up, I'm tying it into the one that's on top. So I'm making almost a half circle there to get that shadow part into that grape. And then I'm going to move right on up into this area, and I'm going to soften that, get a little bit of that out of my brush, and go back to my cobalt so it's cleaner, and pull a little bit of that blue right into there. It doesn't mean that those are going to be blue now. It probably means because of the pink under there or the deep berry, it probably means that when that's fired, you'll see a little bit of pink, but you're also going to see a little bit of blue there. And they'll be kind of purpley rather than just blue or pink. Now, as I come back up this cluster, right in this area, I'm going to put the dark right in here, making 2 or 3 strokes so that matures the strokes. It's not quite dark enough, so I'm going to add a little more blue black to it. And then I'll come right around these grapes because these are part of the grapes that are on top. And then I'm going to go back into cobalt and soften this edge right here. I'm leaving the light. You can see it right there. I'm leaving that highlight. I'm going to work up to about right this far, and then I'll do these leaves that are underneath. But I'm going to work these out first. So I'm still using cobalt and blue black. I'm going to put a little bit right there and right in here. I'm using a little bit, about half of my, a quarter of my brush really to get that in there. And I'm going to pull that right up into that grape that's on top of it. Now I'm not covering the whole thing up. I can still see it, and I'm softening it just a little. I'm going to take my little hot brush, and I'm going to wipe out right here. I'm going to wipe out the reflected light so that I get that back on my grape. Still using cobalt and blue black. What that's doing is that's pulling the color from here, from the grape underneath, up to the one that's next to it. And I'm putting this in the shadow. That's where that goes, is in the shadow. I'm going to soften the edge just a little bit. So what I need to do is go back, and in this case, I'm going to use a little bit of cerulean, and I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to pull that cerulean right into that dark color, because cerulean is lighter, so lighter value of blue. And I'm going to pull that in. See it? It's blue, so I'm going to pull it right into the edge of that dark blue that I put on there, and just soften the edge a little bit. I'm holding my light. That's important. I want to hold that light as long as I can. And I'm going to soften the edge here just a little bit. So I've still got my light here that's important to the grapes. This grape right here I'm going back to cobalt and blue black, loading my brush really good. And I'm putting it on the one that's underneath. Then I'm going to push that color with a wipeout tool or my brush, and I'm going to get that edge back. That's important, that edge right there, because that's going to give me these grapes that I know that are going to be on top. If you need a little bit of help getting a cleaner edge, then use a wipeout tool to get that. Here, I didn't go all the way to the light edge. I'm going to use a little bit of yellow green or chartreuse. My yellow green is pretty strong, so I'm going to use a little bit of that on the edge right there and leave it. And push a little light out right here. Okay, and then this one that's on top right here, I still got that green in my brush. So I'm going to put it in this light area right here and in the reflected light, the green. I'm going to load cobalt. And I'm really loading my brush well. I'm loading it all the way across and then going into a little dark blue. And I'm going to turn this so that I can get this shadow in the right place. And I'm going to put, I've already put some chartreuse on here. So as I put this dark in here, it's just blending with that chartreuse. And that makes that shadow that needs to be on that grape. And I'm going to use a little bit of cerulean right here to make the edge of that grape a little bit further. Those are looking pretty good. I'm soften this a little bit. I always look and see where I can soften if I need to soften an edge. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of depth right in here on this leaf. So in this case, I'm going to use some yellow red and some like yellow brown #2 or a yellow brown color, which is a little darker and not quite as clean. And I'm going to tuck that right up under there. See how I tuck that right up under there? And then I'm going to take my gold ochre and I'm going to soften that edge just a little bit and let it come out away from where I tucked that. I'm leaving my light here though. I want this little piece of light here and I don't want to lose it. So I'm taking, I want this leaf to be a little bit, have a little bit more yellow red on it than it does in my painting. And that is one of the things that makes an artist, is when you see something and you painted it a couple of times, if it doesn't please you, then know that you can change it. It doesn't have to be that way if you don't want it to. So I put a little more of that on, and then I'm using my gold ochre and I'm coming down and just accenting the edge of that leaf with gold ochre, still leaving a little light there. And then on this edge, I'm going to use some, I think I said I was using a little bit of chartreuse or yellow green, either one. You know, most of us have a gob of paint. I had a lady call me the other day and she wanted to get rid of 300 vials of paint. And I've probably got 3 times what she's got. So we have a lot of paint. And just test fire your colors. Then you'll know if they're going to make the right colors that you need for your painting. If you can see it right here, some of that yellow red is already on this grape. Well, I don't want to cover it up. And the reason I did what was underneath first is so that I can go ahead and paint, you know, work up to the ones that are on top, the grapes that are on top. I'm going back to the cobalt. Cobalt is my main color in this color scheme. And that's the one I go back to. I'm either using colors that are still close to it, some lighter, some darker, like the blue black. It's a really nice color to add depth. And I'm just going to put it over that pink grape. If I want a little more pink, I go to my deep berry and pick that up as that comes around. So it'll still have some pink on it, but it puts it behind this grape that's on top. And I'm doing the same thing. I like these pinks or the deep berry or a ruby or something like that. I like those underneath in my painting. They make shred. What's so neat about being able to, this grape is being able to use those colors. This grape is back behind some stems. So I'm painting with the edge of my brush, but I'm really smoothing it as I put it in there. It's important that you smooth that paint down. What you're doing is you're maturing that stroke so that you don't have streaks in your painting. You have strokes instead of streaks. More cobalt and blue black. I want that a little darker because it really is setting behind these grapes. You can see that when I add that little extra depth there, it really put this stem in front to hook onto this grape and pushed these two grapes in front also. So I'm turning this around and I'm putting that blue, black, and cobalt into that grape that's on top. If you notice, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I left the reflected light. So I'm taking the reflected light and I'm going to put a lighter value blue there on that reflected light and work it into that edge of dark I just put on there. If I want it to be a little greener, sometimes I'll use green and pick up that edge with a little bit of green. I like that, so I'm going to leave that. Then this one's got to be darkened right here. So I'm painting, basically, I'm painting what's underneath now. I'm painting the grapes that are underneath this leaf. So they do have to be darker than the leaf. And I'm working up to the ones right here that are on top. And if I paint over them, that's okay, because I'm going to come back with a lighter value. And I'm thinking I'm going to put a little green on that. So I'm going to come back with my lighter value and put it into this grape. And then I'm going to go back to my cobalt and work up that shadow right there. The blue and the green, because they're analogous colors, because they lay close together on the color wheel, they'll mix real nice and you don't have to worry about making mud. I've not put anything on this piece that would make mud. They're all colors that blend together one into the other, even the purples. The purples blend into the blue. So I haven't, I'm going to use a little bit of deep berry and then a little bit of blue black. And I'm going to put it on this grape right here. And soften the edge. Take a little bit of clean deep berry and just come right around the edge. And this right here, I have to go back and lift that grape out. Can you see how I lifted that one out? That separated it from the ones that are back behind. And I always work the ones underneath before I ever paint anything on the ones that are on top. So I work the ones that are underneath, moving up to the ones that are on top. This one is underneath this one, so I'll work it first and then move up to the one next to it. I'm just going to put a little bit of cobalt on this one right here, softly. I'm going to leave the reflected light to soften the edge of the cobalt. Leave the reflected light, because I might put something else on it in a little bit. And this one, I love this yellow red on this grape, so I don't want to disturb that. If I cover it up with blue, it'll make that grape look muddy. So I'm going to just use some cobalt, but I'm not going to cover up that yellow red. I'm just going to go and accent it right here. I'm holding the yellow red and I'm just laying the cobalt next to it. And that I'm going to a little bit of chartreuse here because I want that green just to pull into that blue that I put on there. And I'm really watching that yellow red because I like that color on that grape. I'm still holding my lights on these light ones up here on top. Don't cover up your light. If you do, all your grapes will look like they're all in shadow instead of where your light source is coming from. Back to cobalt and blue black. And I'm going to put that right under here and pull it into the grape that's next to it. I want to lose the edge of those two grapes. And why would I want to lose the edge? Because they're back behind. And when you lose an edge, you want those to disappear into the background. I'm going to use some deep berry, some cobalt, that's going to make a purple, and add a little blue black to it. And I'm going to put some depth right in here. This is the really dark grape that's back behind. Okay, and I smooth that out by maturing my brush stroke. And then I'll bring a little bit of that purple that I've got in my brush around. I might put a little more. And here on this one, on this one that's on top, I'll put a little purple on it. Well, as you can see, and I love to paint grapes. And so it's all about, basically, it's all about decorating those little round objects that you've got on there, decorating them so that they blend together as a total cluster, but also have a little bit of personality. And as many years as I've been painting grapes, one of my favorite things is the fact that I can experiment with color. And it's the color of the grape. I already know how to paint them. So it's the color that helps me to enjoy my painting so much more by changing colors, overlapping colors, because that's what we have. We have very transparent colors. And so what's underneath is going to show through. I'll show you that in a minute on the finished piece again, about how the colors, I'll get it up closer so you can see how the colors look as they are fired on there. If you're an advanced painter or you've been painting a while, then you know about all that. If you're not, then it's sometimes a real it's like Christmas, because you're not real sure what color is going to really come through. If you use color mixes like I have with the deep berry and the blues, then you're going to have different shades of purple in your grapes. I'm going right up here to the top, and look what happens when I put that stroke up there on that grape that's behind. What do I have? I have a grape that comes forward, and that gives me the light that I need for the grape that's on top. I'm going to go right in. I've still got some of that in my brush, so I'm going to go ahead and paint that one that's underneath there. I'm going to pull that leaf back on top of it and wipe that one back on top. Now those are green and I painted them green in the beginning. So one thing I don't want to use on them to make them too muddy, I don't want to use my blue black because that'll make them really dark and muddy. So I want a little bit of a cooler green. So I'm using my French green or a cool green and a little bit of black green. So that's going to put these right behind. Oop, about to lose my voice. I don't know what that's all about. And then I'm going to put a little bit of shadow right in there on the one that's on top. See that little shadow I put? Okay, let's soften that shadow a little bit. And this time we're going to use my gold ochre. And we're going to take a little bit of gold ochre and we're going to soften that edge of that shadow I just put on there. I'm not covering this up yet. I still want these little highlights that I've left in here. Those are very important. I need a little bit of water, so I'm going to take a drink here. I guess that was why I was choking. Okay, I'm putting a little bit of deep berry right there in that shadow part on that green grape. Now that's where you don't want to get in there and scrub around on it. I had just put color on it. So I'm just laying that layer of color right on top. Takes a little time to work with that kind of thing, to learn how to lay color on top of color that's wet. But if I didn't do it now, it wouldn't gray very much. I mean, it wouldn't gray as much. If doing it now makes it a little grayer. If I wait until another fire, then it's going to be a little bit more punchy. But this way, it'll just blend into the color that I put underneath it. And if my grapes get out around, then I try to clean those up so that they won't have little funny edges on them. And so right now I'm just deepening what's underneath, and I'm going to do the same thing over here with these grapes in this area. I'm going to still use the cobalt and the blue black because the cobalt is clean and clear, and I'm putting the blue black, which is going to darken it on the inside corner of my brush so that I get that depth that I need in there. Just putting it, and I'm going to pull these together. I hope you can see that. I'm pulling that edge of these together. And that's going to lose an edge, which I don't need. All I need is to know the color that's on top. I'm going to use a little bit of my lighter blue and, excuse me, and I'm going to pull this around and soften that edge. And I'm going to pull just a little bit of light right here at the edge of it. Soften this down. When I painted that grape the first time, I got a little big. Now I can't do anything about that. Okay, it's fired on there. I'm not a wink person, which is an acid. So I just, if it's a little big, that's okay. You know, some of them get bigger than the others anyway in their growth when they're growing on the vine. So these are all little dark shapes that are going back behind the stems. And I'm still using cobalt and blue black, a little bit of a lighter color, little blue here, picking up a little blue edge, pulling it into that. A little blue edge here. leaving my reflected light. This is a highlight. This is a melded highlight that we left on the last fire. That's important because when the light hits two objects at the same time, that will wash out the edge. So if you have two grapes and the light hits it, it'll wash out the edge. And the same thing happens in the shadows. So over here, I've put color that is almost the same as what the grape that's laying next to it, so that it will wash out and lose the edge. You don't need to see every edge that's on the grapes. Now, if you're a botanical painter, and I've painted this way, I've done botanical grapes. If you're doing botanical grapes and you want to see every color on every grape, then you can do that. You can separate them. And some of us are. Some of us are more botanical painters. I'm maybe more realistic. I don't know if that's the word, but if you're painting naturalistic and you're painting not in the studio, but from photographs of the vineyard, then you really are more interested in the light and what happens to the light on that grape than in separating all the grapes. So when I pull them together, I'm really more interested in these light places. And I'm going to put a little bit of yellow right in there. See how I brushed that in there? Right where those two grapes meet. I just brushed a little yellow. I'm going to pull it right over in here and just pull it into that blue and soften the edge. And then I'm going to work these. I've got these three right here, and I'm still using the same color. I'm not changing colors because this is a different color. This is not blue. It's a purple. And it's a purple from us putting on deep berry and cobalt blue on the first fire. So what I'm really after now is to darken that with a little bit of cobalt and blue black. And if I want a little bit of deep berry in the brush, then I put it in there. Look at this stroke I made. What does it do? It sets up the edge of these two that are on top. And then you take your brush and pull it around. And I'm actually pulling those pretty much together because they're in shadow. All right, if I want to separate it just a little bit, then right where the light might hit, I'll pull out a little bit of highlight, and that's it, because those are behind. And you can tell that when I put that color on there, it made these pop out in front of the ones behind. That's how you create depth. When you're not trying to create depth and you put the same value on, you're trying to push things back, especially if it's a dark value. Okay, I'm going to use a little bit of cobalt and I'm going to just darken this a little bit right here. Pull it right up underneath that leaf. The cobalt is darker than that gold ochre that I put on the leaf, so that pushes that behind that leaf, the edge of it. I'm going to get that out of my brush and go into, now, you know that I'm going from blue back into green. So there's no mud there. I'm going into that chartreuse or yellow green. And that made that grape a real pretty color. So we can move on from that and move into this leaf that's underneath. So I'm not painting these on top yet. That's the last thing I do. I'm going to go back here and add a little bit of chartreuse to this grape because it was, I ruined the shape of it. It was flattened on top and I want to get it back to round. Grapes, are round and they're oval, and they're sometimes I've seen clusters out in the vineyard where they're almost a rectangle shape, and the grapes are smashed on one side. They're so tight in a cluster. So you're going to get a lot of different ideas, if you, especially if you have time to photograph grapes in the vineyard. Now I'm going up in here on this leaf, and I'm going to work this dark area right here. At this time, I'm going to use a little bit of a cool green, like French green, and again a little bit of my black green, because what I really want to do is I just want to tuck this up underneath that grape, that part of that leaf. Okay, so I made a dark shape there. Now I might want to change that shape a little bit, and to do that I would take some yellow, like mixing yellow, or I would take some gold ochre, and or some chartreuse, either one, it doesn't matter. All you're doing is you're softening the edge, that's all. And you want to be sure you leave it in there. Now I just pulled it out, so now I got to go back and put it back in there. I just pulled that out, that dark shape, and I want to put it back in there because this leaf is dark. I'm going to lay it on top of this grape back here, and I just want to soften that edge. I'm going to use a little bit of same green, French green, a little bit of black green, and I'm going to tuck it right in here next to this, pull it into here, and then just softly pull it right over the edge of that yellow red right there. When I put those shapes in, I always come back with another lighter value and kind of soften the edge. This is chartreuse. So I'm softening the edge of that, and I'm going to bring that chartreuse, even though it's, not real dark, and that leaf doesn't have to be real dark. This is a new growth leaf, so it doesn't have to be. And then I'm going to use some of my gold ochre, and I'm just going to pull it in there for some light there on that leaf. You can see that yellow on it. And then I might, because I'm thinking here, even though this is not like the first fire, I'm thinking that I want some yellow red on this leaf. So I'm just accenting. Now that yellow red on that leaf, what is it going to do? It's going to turn that green a little bit of a gray color. And then I'm going back into my French green here, and I'm setting up the edges stroke by stroke, just setting the edges of the leaf up, holding the light. I don't want to lose my light here, this little light here and this piece of light there. I'm trying to be careful not to lose that. But I like that little bit of yellow red because it kind of pulls this into this leaf. The yellow red is a complement to these blue grapes. And so that's important if we want to complement this piece and have the grapes be the focal area, then we set that up with a complementary color. Now in this leaf, it's actually a little brighter than the one that I painted in my original plate, and you can look at that. So this is a little bit duller, and it's okay, and that's all right, but I painted it a little bit brighter this time. And remember, if you were here last time, I stamped that with a little bit of saran wrap. So I'm going in here and I'm going to texture this leaf with my strip liner, which is a long tail white nylon scroller, basically is what it is. And it is white and it's nylon. So what that means is that it always, and it's also a synthetic brush, so it always stays pointed and it always just bounces back. It never drags on me. I never lose its shape or anything. So I'm going into my South Brown, which is a yellow red color, and a little bit of gold ochre. Okay, and I'm going to go in here. You probably cannot see this, but there are some shapes here. These shapes have a white edge around them. And so I'm going in between and I'm painting inside those shapes to give this leaf some texture. And I'm putting that texture right up against the vein there. Okay, that's pretty bold and that's okay. I'm going to soften it in just a minute, but I need that dark in there to give me some form and a little bit of texture on these leaves. I didn't stamp all of them. I just happened to stamp the one that was on top. And if you miss that, it's real easy. You just paint on the back of a real leaf, or you and stamp it, or you just get you a little bit of saran wrap and wad it up and stamp into your wet paint. So what we're trying to do is create texture here, and creating that texture, the stamping's okay, but I like to go a step further by putting some of that color into those stamp marks so that it makes the texture of the leaf. And then I just soften it. I just press into it a little bit. Now, this was up here was gold ochre, this color. And I'm going to use some, a little bit of yellow green. And I'm going to come in here over the gold ochre. It won't hurt anything. It'll just make that gold ochre a little bit greener. And I'm leaving my lights, and I'm picking up some of the edge of this stamping, and I'm going to move it to the edge. I'm moving it to the edge of the leaf. Okay. So I just want to accent the edge of that leaf. That's all I'm doing. And then I want to add, I'm going to add just a little bit more of the yellow red up here, picking up the gold ochre, because it between it and the yellow red is just one step on the color wheel. So we're still using analogous color, softening the edge right there, and just making, decorating. Basically, you're decorating. I'm decorating this leaf. That's what I'm doing. And putting color where I want it to decorate the shape, and also to build form in the leaf. Takes a little practice. This is something that you have to practice. I told them last time, if you get some grape leaves and you paint on the back of them with a little bit of color and you stamp it on a plate and fire it, then you have something you can practice on. So you can see the shapes, you can see the texture that's in the leaf, and it's a real good practice way to, I've taught my students that for a long time, and it's a really good way to make that work for you. Okay, so here I'm using a little bit of, this is old gold green. It's a nice neutral warm green color, and so I'm just using it, and then I'm going into a little bit of yellow red. I tried to get a little bit of that old gold green off my brush, and I'm going to accent this leaf that comes up next to the grapes here with a little bit of color. Then I'll go back to the gold ochre and soften that edge a little bit and pull this edge into my shapes that are there. And if that grape leaf has lights and darks and a little bit of highlight in it, that's great. And if you don't like it once it's fired, then you can wash some yellow into it, and that'll give you a lot of light. I like to leave sometimes just some white or the color that's underneath there to help to help it have some form. So I'm going to use my French green. I need just a little bit more water here in my mouth. I'm going to use some French green and pull it in with that warm green right there. You see how I just put that brush stroke in and hit the edge of it, and it just disappears. So the hard edge is not there. I'm just setting up the edge of this leaf right here. That's what I want to do. When I paint with a white background, then I'm real interested in setting up edges of the leaves and edges of the grapes. When I'm painting with a filtered background or putting color in the background, then I'm more interested in losing edges of the leaves than bringing them forward. A little chartreuse. I don't like the shape of this grape right here, so I'm putting a little chartreuse on the edge of it to round it up. It's and it's not working too much, but it's all right. I flattened it out myself when I painted it the first time. Okay, so now we look at this and we say, well, what do we need? Do we need to pull some lights out? What do we need? Okay, so I need a little more depth in the shadow only. So I'm using some cobalt and a little bit of deep berry. And I want it in the shadow on these grapes that are on top. Okay, kind of pulling that together, losing that edge, and basically decorating these two grapes right here and softening that edge. If I need to soften it more, I can use my finger to do that. I'm going to use that color I still have in my brush. I need to pump up this depth right here, and then I want to bring this right up in so that this is not quite so white here. And I want to bring some deep berry into it. So I put pure deep berry into that stroke that I just made. I love that. I love that edge there. Just that little bit of deep berry there. And then pull out my reflected light again. Now, reflected light, the important thing about it is whatever it's laying next to, that's where it's going to get its reflection from. So if it happens to be a green leaf, then that's where you can use your chartreuse in that reflected light, because it's picking up the color from the leaf. And don't be afraid to try those things and add those little bit of color into your. And yes, I've already painted these, but I'm going back and I'm just looking at the overall picture here. How do I want this to look? Where do I want my light to be? I don't want to cover up my highlight here. This is one of those melded areas of light. I don't want to cover that up. Even though I put green there, I'm going to take a little bit of light there. Now, right here, this doesn't seem to be working because there's a rim right here. So I'm thinking that's part of my grape and that rim light there, and I need to pull that into the edge of the grape. And so the grape is over green right here. So I'm pulling it right into that green. Now, I love this, I like that yellow red. So I want to move that yellow red around a little bit into the light, right like that. Just add a little bit of yellow red to some of these paintings of the grapes on top, add a little there, add a little there. It's just a little dot or a little slash of it. It's moves the color from the leaves into the grapes. And what you have also is grape color in the leaves. So how do we do that? Well, we take a little bit of cobalt and right in here where there was a little bit of white, I'm just going to put a little bit of cobalt on that leaf. Did that get rid of my highlight? Yeah, a little bit. So I'm just going to get it back. But I still have that blue there. Same thing here. I'm taking that blue and I'm painting it into that wet green that I already have on here to make this a little bluer, so that blue color is on the leaf. You have to be careful though about putting it into yellow red. You have to put it, if you put it in yellow red, you're going to make gray. And so you want to make sure that you're putting it into a color that it's not going to really change the color. This is yellow, mixing yellow, okay? I'm hitting that in the light, pulling it into, and the yellow and the blue, what does that make? A little green. So I'm pulling that into the light on the grapes. These are my little accent touches that I like to put into my paintings. And just, we're just getting there. We're just about through with this. So on the stem work, I'm taking a little bit of dark green and I'm going to go under this curlicue here, which is a tendril basically, to set it up so it has a light edge and a shadow edge. It's already got color on it. It's chartreuse. So we want a light edge and a dark edge. Then I want a little more light on this edge of this stem. And the other thing to help my design, I look at my cruciform. So this is my cruciform design. Well, it seems to be working all right. And it works better because I added these grapes down at the bottom. And I made this come down a little bit further. And so that really helped that cruciform type of line. Chartreuse here, just accenting the top edge of the stem. These can be any color, really. I've seen them really, really red, and I've seen them what I call yellow red. I've seen them gray. So, you know, you can paint them as many colors as you want. I've even accented them with deep berry and ruby to make them more outstanding. Okay, I'm going to use the chartreuse. And by the way, I'll tell you about chartreuse and yellow green. If you've got a nice yellow green, it's that color right there, that nice yellow green color. It's a great color if you want to substitute it for light, not using yellow, but you still want it to be light. That yellow green is a really good color to use for that. Now, what I want to do is I want to come in here and I'm painting my stems with yellow green. Okay. So those white stems that were holding up the grapes that I've left all through this painting, I'm painting them yellow green. You can paint them anything if you want to, because they will turn. Sometimes when the grapes get really ripe, they will turn yellow red, and you can make them yellow red. Might need just a little more accent here, just to accent the edge of that stem, just so that it's working well here. And then I use my French green and sign my name to it. I've been spending a lot of time at home making short videos, 2-fire videos with a study. And of course, doing my Zoom classes, that has helped me a lot. And those eventually will be sold on my website. So they're not too expensive. And I think you'd probably enjoy them if you like 2-fire things. I've done some red grapes and also some blue plums. I'm going to add a little more depth. I'm looking at my plate that I finished, and I'm going to add a little more depth down in here. Now, I know we've already done this, but I'm seeing that I need a little more if I'm going to do this in just 2 fires. So mostly that is cobalt and blue black, just to get the depth in there. All right. So let's look at this a little bit more. You can change the color of your grapes. All right. I'm going to set this aside. Oops. Set this aside a minute and let's look at this. You can change the color of your grapes, and you can change them. And if you want them more purple, you just use a little bit more deep berry and your cobalt blue. If you want them a little more blue or blue black, you use cobalt and blue black. If you want to accent, now I didn't accent any of these grapes here on this piece with deep berry. But on this one, I put deep berry into the grapes more. It's up to you. And that's what makes you an artist, is for you to make the decisions about what you want to put and how you want that to accent your piece. Also, I sent you this little tile in your second fire. And basically, it's the same color scheme. Okay, but I've used a little more deep berry and I've softened the leaves quite a bit. Okay, they're not as punchy as they are on this piece that we just did. And if so, you fire it, and maybe you don't like this yellow red on there. I do, but if you don't like it that much, then you just put a wash over it. You can put some gold ochre over it, or you can put some yellow green over it, and it will neutralize it and work real well. So 2-fire things are fun, and I'm going to continue to do some series of 2-fire fruits. My next one is going to be on blackberries, and I've done red grapes and the blue plums, and I'm going to do some blackberries and try to help those that are a little bit more. That fruit is a really good teaching tool, because when you have fruit, then you're learning how to control your brush. You're learning how to control all parts of your brush and your paint and loading your brush. So thank you so much for joining me on this second 2-fire Zoom. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer whatever you need to know.
At this time, if anyone in the audience has a question, unmute yourself and ask the question, and then remember to mute yourself as Paula is making the answer. Thank you. All right.
Sounds like
if we
they
have,
know it. They know it now. They
yeah,
know it all.
So if they have no questions, Paula, we want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your talents with us today. The recording of this presentation will be posted tonight on the iPad Museum YouTube channel, where all the other Zoom presentations are also located. And then you will find it on the iPad website, which is ipadinc.org, under the Zoom tab, with also PDF presentations will be on the website. Thank you very much, Paula, and
Well, thank you.
for coming
Thank you for
today.
joining me today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.